What's going on, FA Nation? My name is Justin Fensterman, along with James Grande, and it's time to win some DFS NBA. Mr. Grande, what's going on? 8 games to dominate tonight, my friend.
Fensty, happy Tuesday. We're halfway through the week. Not really, but I'd like to think so. I'm ready, man. 8 games, lots of injuries. The norm, as we know, is now lots of injuries, but ready to dominate with you as always, brother.
Yep, we have a waterfall of them coming in. So here's what we have right now, and then we'll go back to the web to get more of these updates. Players that are out right now include Kyle Lowry, Fred VanVleet, both from the Raptors, Malcolm Brogdon, Domantas Sabonis. That recently came in. News on both of them. John Collins is out. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is out. Evan Fournier is out. Yusuf Nurkic as well. DeAndre Hunter is out. DeAnthony Melton is out. Serge Ibaka is out. George Hill as well. Daniel Tice, Justice Winslow, Eric Paschall, Rodney Hood, and then what recently just came out, Killian Hayes is going to be out. Same with Rodney McGruder as well. Now, some of the questionables that we have, James, include Zion Williamson with that thumb, Brandon Ingram with the toe, Jamal Murray with the knee, Andre Drummond with his toe, Brandon Clark with his calf, Kyra Lewis Jr. is doubtful with a calf injury. Patrick Beverley, questionable with a knee injury. Jeremy Lamb, this came in recently, questionable but likely to play. And then Wes Matthews is questionable with a neck injury. Anything I just mentioned, I know the news has been pelting us in the last 2 minutes.
Nothing particular. Interesting to see Jeremy Lamb expected to play, especially considering what we just lost in Indiana. So definitely something to continue to monitor because, Fancy, we know, like, right now he could be in, and then 20 minutes later he could just be ruled out, and we'll have to just wait and see the official word.
I want to also put a warning out there for Hamidou Diallo because the Pistons are one of the 2 teams, along with the Raptors, to have the super slate of 5 games this week. Diallo wasn't playing in back-to-backs. Doesn't mean it's not going to happen. They did trade for this guy, but they don't want him getting re-injured. He was coming off an injured groin when he came to Detroit. So I just want to put that out there as well because we're going to be looking at Detroit for value, James. So don't be surprised if we get a piece of news soon enough that Hamidou Diallo will also be out or at least limited. But for now, let's go to Ray Kuhn's DFS NBA playbook on fantasyalarm.com. Talk about the point guard position, high-priced guards on the night, Grande. As always, per tradition, you start us off. I'm passing the torch to you here. So where do we start when it comes to this position?
So I do think we start at Steph, and I don't necessarily love the top tier of point guard tonight. I'm okay living in that mid to value tier personally. But if I were to spend up, it would be Steph Curry. Steph looks good. Steph looks pissed, by the way. If you heard that interview the other day where he thought they would be better than they currently are, they're just not very good. And Steph is doing everything he can. If you just look at recent output, 32, 36, 37 actual points. So, Steph, salute to you for doing your part. The rest of your team needs to follow. A very high-profile game. I think Steph Curry gets up for this one. Definitely my top spend at point guard. Again, Betsy, you and I have been on this live stream a lot lately, and a lot of times we have Portland. And you and I kind of have set on the same side of the fence in terms of Dame Lillard, where we don't need to play Damian Lillard at this elevated price tag right now. There is a lot going on in Portland. There was a lot of additions, and 1 by injury, getting McCollum back, 2 by injury, getting Yusuf Nurkic back as well, and then 1 addition in the trade market, getting Norman Powell, who was a bona fide scorer. So Lillard, can go off, and he did a couple in Milwaukee and in Detroit, but it's, a few and far between, and 34 fantasy points last time out doesn't do it. The 6 games prior didn't do it. I don't think we need to go to Dame if you want to go there in a tournament. It's an interesting pivot because I don't think a lot of people will play him given recent form. So if you want to play Dame in a tournament, it's fine. It's just not – I just haven't felt good rostering him. And we're going to get to shooting guard and probably mention CJ McCollum's name and probably say the same thing, rinse, repeat. It's like, well, I'd rather pay CJ McCollum, who's cheaper, who's been more productive, right? So I love Curry at the top. I think Dame is strictly a tournament play. I don't think we need to go there, especially when you look at the playbook here, Fancy. There's 2 names that are standing out to me. I know you love Drew Holiday, and then Lonzo Ball is the other guy that could be in an absolute smash spot if those Pelicans like Zion and Ingram sit. So I think the next tier,
I need Kyra Lewis out too to go all in.
Yeah, I mean, he's doubtful, so I expect him to sit.
Right.
I expect him to sit. So I'm not going to say like even if Kyra Lewis plays though, Fancy, it's like yes, I agree that Kyra Lewis will have a role, but there's no NAW, right? So
and there's no Josh Hart for those.
And there's no Josh Hart. So we will get a large workload out of Lonzo regardless. I get it. Isaiah Thomas is, probably going to fit in somewhere, but Kyra Lewis doesn't like move the needle for me as much as Zion and Ingram would, because let's face it. I mean, Lonzo hit 8 threes the other night. We're not going to get that same Lonzo with Zion and Ingram, most likely in the lineup. Without them, Lonzo has the keys to the Lambo. So I love Lonzo, and I love Drew Holiday. Someone that you and I have been kind of talking about all day when we were talking about roster construction. Drew Holiday made a lot of those builds. Recent form for Drew Holiday, Fensty, has been, look, he got paid, and he's played like the player that is deserving of that money.
Right. And with that, that's why I'm fine with paying for him. And I was going to ask you, so you've got, let's say you want to spend up if you're on FanDuel. Let's just say you've got either Curry or Holiday. Why not then go all the way down and go with a little bit of a dart throw here? Because as we mentioned, we've got two main pieces of the Raptors out. And Look who has been taking advantage over the last few weeks. Sitting there at 3,900 on DraftKings, Malachi Flynn now hit the 30-minute mark in his last 2 games, scoring 16 points in both, grabbing a few boards, running the point, also helping with those peripherals, which I know you like. 3 straight multi-steal games for him. I mean, how do you ignore this?
I mean, they drafted him in the first for a reason, right? Like, there was obviously mutual interest. I'm sure the thought of Kyle Lowry leaving this offseason was always there as well, right? Like, this could be the potential point guard of the future. And he's gotten a chance to prove it on a team that's not in contention anymore. Let's face it, Toronto is, not what they were. So there's no reason that he's not going to continue to see 30 minutes. It's funny because I was talking to John and Pemba late last night as we went to record the pod, and he said that he got Malachi Flynn at 12%. Well, I was like, how is that possible? He was so free. Well, everyone jumped off board when they saw DeAndre Bembry was starting.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily mean anything. You could play Bembry, who's free, but you can also play Malachi Flynn if he's going to play 30-plus minutes. It doesn't matter if you're starting or if you're coming off the bench if you're going to put up this type of production. So I think it's just important to bring up, if you didn't play last night and you didn't notice that Malachi Flynn wasn't in the starting lineup and you're playing tonight, don't be alarmed, okay? He's going to play 30-plus minutes. He played 30 minutes in a 50-point win. He played 30 minutes in a 2-point win. So whether or not it's a blowout or not, Malachi Flynn's going to play 30-plus minutes. I completely agree, Fancy. I think he, at least on DraftKings, is the top value, because on FanDuel, I think there is an interesting dilemma now that we have Killian Hayes out, potential for Hamidou Diallo to be out. I think there's a couple interesting names in Detroit that I'm sure you are a bit interested in.
Well, yeah, but I got to ask you then, so how do you think the minutes will be divided essentially between Corey Joseph, Saban Lee, and Dennis Smith Jr.? That was something that, as we were talking about lineups earlier today, I was having a lot of trouble figuring that out. But that was before we got the official word on Hayes.
Right. So it seems to me like Saban Lee and Dennis Smith are the two getting the short ends of the stick. Corey Joseph, yes, he didn't play like the 24 to 28 minutes that he was playing before Hayes returned, but he still played more than Saban Lee and Dennis Smith. Dennis Smith hasn't seen more than 11 minutes in each of the last 2. Saban Lee only played 13 and 19. So I think it's Corey Joseph personally, and I think it's probably Saban Lee. But I will, err on the side of caution. They started Dennis Smith over Saban Lee the other day in that second half because Saban Lee looked terrible. So, I think Joseph is the safest of the group. I think you probably agree with that he's probably the safest. The only thing is, like, if Denver, and I shouldn't say if, when Denver is up 20 in this game, right? is Corey Joseph the guy getting the run? That's the only, I think, troubling part. At that point, I think you could see more Saban Lee, and that's where I would agree with Ray in the playbook. So maybe on DraftKings, you don't worry about these Detroit guys and you play Malachi Flynn because he's still 3,900. He's still being given to us for free. Yeah,
it's the risk isn't even there. It seems like
no risk, right? Because we're not even asking. We're asking for 19 fantasy points. Maybe on FanDuel is where you take the shot on a Corey Joseph or Saban Lee, because Malachi Flynn's 51, and that is a decision in its own right. So I like Saban Lee and Corey Joseph more on FanDuel. I think it's just too easy. You plug and play Malachi Flynn on DraftKings.
Let's move on to the shooting guards here. We mentioned CJ McCollum here. It's 8K, sub 8K on FanDuel, 7-9. But what other high-priced shooting guards do you like tonight before I talk about how we should be including Gary Trent Jr. in our lineups?
Shocker. So I'm interested in Zach LaVine. So definitely interested in McCollum. Have some interest in Paul George because of matchup, not because of recent form, but matchup specifically. It doesn't really get much better than Portland. LaVine's price, Fancy, like we were talking about Zach LaVine at near 10K prior to Nikola Vucevic before his arrival. And yes, Vucevic has obviously taken some of the peripherals away from LaVine. I mean, Vucevic is a really good rebounder. That's just naturally going to happen, right? LaVine's not going to be crashing the glass as much because Vooch is a vacuum. So, but we can't ignore the scoring upside. And now there's no Brogdon to defend. There's no Sabonis potentially at the rim. Like, it's going to be hard to not at least entertain LaVine in tournaments. But Fancy, I think something that's missing here. And, we just got the news. So maybe Ray adds him to the playbook or core play article. It's Victor Oladipo. I mean, oh my gosh.
I knew where you were going.
Karis LeVert. It's Karis LeVert.
Yes.
Karis LeVert. I mean, there's no Sabonis. There's no Brogdon. Miles Turner is not the offensive weapon or hasn't developed into the one that maybe we thought he would out of Texas. This is going to be the Karis LeVert show like we saw in Brooklyn. When Karis LeVert was the guy in Brooklyn, Fensty, this was a 9K player we were getting at 65, 71. Hey, Fensty, $7,000 over on DraftKings tonight. He's going to be, we'll also have TJ McConnell mixed in there, who I think also should get some love here. I think TJ McConnell's also in play. Very good fantasy producer.
But he's facing the Bulls, so that makes it even sweeter.
Right. So I think this backcourt in general has a ton of appeal considering they are facing the Bulls. So,
and that takes the play away from Gary Trent because they're in the same price range. And I'm going to go.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. It doesn't take the play away. I mean, look, LeVert is the play at least in cash. Like you're playing Karis LeVert in cash games. He should be one of the highest owned players. But I don't think the pivot to Gary Trent in tournaments is a bad decision. Gary Trent still scored yesterday. He just didn't get those peripheral stats that we've been getting. There's a guy who averages a steal per game. So if that comes back or that doubles up, I mean, Fancy, there's no Van Vliet. The price has dipped $400 from yesterday, and the Lakers are playing no defense. So I like Gary Trent. I think it's a tournament pivot of Karis LeVert. Now listen, that's not me saying I'm playing him over Karis LeVert because I'm not. But it is definitely someone that you should consider if you are a tournament player only and you don't want to get 50% Karis LeVert, we pivot to Gary Trent. So I do think that it's in play. I don't think that you should say that it takes it away from anything because Gary Trent's been a baller since he arrived in Toronto. So with the lack of options that they have, if Siakam has a bad shooting night, I mean, it could fall on Gary Trent's hand. Gary Trent could be, the primary scorer here, and then, I think your tone would change a little bit. So I think, it is definitely LeVert as the core play and Trent as the GPP pivot for sure.
Any other shooting guards you like when it comes to value for tonight's slate?
Yeah, the Heat guys I think are interesting in value. I think I actually think this game at shooting guard in general, the value is interesting because we have some injuries on the Memphis side of things as well. someone like Desmond Bane or Grayson Allen. Yeah, I think both of those guys could sneak into lineups here. Desmond Bane 4,100 on DraftKings, Grayson Allen 44. Both been playing really well, both averaging over 20 fantasy points per game in the last 5. So I like the Heat guys in this game. I like the Memphis value. I think there's a lot of value at shooting guard tonight.
Yep, I will say this too. Just saw this piece of news from Boston. Evan Fournier, not only because of health issues, protocols rather, so probably COVID somewhat, he's going to miss a week at least.
Wow.
Kemba Walker, he will play tonight, not tomorrow though. So there we go. So all aboard Kemba tonight.
Right.
They're going to use him. At least we know that he's getting the 30 minutes, right?
Right.
So that
use and abuse, baby. Use and abuse.
Hey, safe floor. I like that. Yep. All right, let's move on to the threes here and talk about Kawhi Leonard, whether or not we should be paying up for him or we spend a little bit, go the value tier. But it's against Portland, man, and no disrespect. I mean, I love Robert Covington and what he's done, but he's the only one to do it. And with that, I think Kawhi's going to be able to have his way.
Let's see. It's funny you said the exact – you know what? We got to pull the clip back. It was the same thing you said about Robert Covington because you're right. You're 100% right. Spot on. It's the same thing you said about him guarding Giannis, and then Giannis went for 47 actual points. Because It's true. Like, he is the only guy, and he is a good defender, but he can't guard everybody. I think Kawhi Leonard provides us with a very safe floor. I don't think that he's not giving us the 60. He's not going to pop for 70, but you better believe he's going to get you 40-plus fantasy points every single night. So I really like Kawhi and Cash. I think the same can be said for Butler. I think everything's been inconsistent. We're getting scoring with Butler, then we're not getting the rebounds and assists. We're getting the rebounds and assists. We only get 16 points last time out. So I like them both. I think I'm just, kind of looking elsewhere.
I'm looking at the Denver guys. I'll tell you that much.
I'm looking at the Denver guys with you. I'm right there. I'm right there with you as long as that game stays close. But even if it doesn't, it's something that you bring up a lot, and it's generally has to do with Kristaps Porzingis. Shout out to him. If there is a blowout, it's because somebody's scoring the basketball a whole lot. So I'm with you. Porter,
yes,
Gordon.
We know it could be Jokic doing it, likely to be Jokic, but we still have Jamal Murray hanging in the air. Right. And we're still liking these. Even if Murray plays, I still like the Denver guys tonight. Really, I like Aaron Gordon, but if you're asking me who I think has the bigger minute ceiling, I'm going to have to go with Michael Porter. What do you think?
I think it's close, maybe because, we're still getting Aaron Gordon kind of acclimated to things. That could be the case. We did see Aaron Gordon play 35 minutes last time out. 39 the game before. I think we could be seeing just consistent 30s out of everybody. Like, you get 30 minutes. You get 30 minutes. Listen, this is a really good Denver team with the addition of Aaron Gordon. He has fit perfectly. And I do think it has affected Jokic in terms of scoring because there's just, Aaron Gordon is a 16, 17 point per game kind of guy. And that's going to take away from everybody. But it hasn't taken away from my boy Michael Porter. I'll tell you that for dang sure. He just keeps being an assassin offensively.
What do you think of your guy Bogdan? Priced up a bit more.
Yeah, when John said his price tag over on FanDuel, I just about fell out of my seat, and not because my seat is partly broken, but because I was just shocked to hear 7,200. But look, Fancy, the Pelicans are really banged up, and even when they're not, they're a bottom 5 defensive team. Stan Van Gundy has really not done anything for them defensively, I'll tell you that. So, Atlanta's hurt themselves. They have a lot of pieces missing, and Bogdan has definitely stepped up. I obviously prefer the 62 over on DraftKings because, on FanDuel, you can get OG for a similar price, who's, again, been great in his own regard, and he doesn't have Van Vliet or Lowry or any of these guys. So, I prefer OG over on FanDuel, but on DraftKings 6,200, I'm perfectly fine with that price tag.
Let's move on to the power forwards here because I think Ray really nailed this position perfectly here because you've got, with an injured Zion, don't know his status at this point, you've got Giannis up there who, going up against the Warriors, that's not going to be a problem. You think he ate a Robert Covington? Draymond Green's next? That's not going to be a problem for him, even though it is a very high price for Giannis's demands. But if you don't want to go with him, you actually turned me on to Pascal Siakam a little bit more earlier, James. And again, we go back to no starting backcourt for the Raptors. You got to look to see who's going to be alone in the leading scorers for the team, and it's going to be him. And he's sitting there in the 8Ks as well. We mentioned Aaron Gordon, and then finally, because it's Detroit, I mean, Jeremy Grant has to be in play sub 7K. Even though it's not fun, it's sub 7K.
And Fency, what's the kicker there? We have a kicker with Jeremy Grant. Revenge narrative, baby. Going back to Denver. So I agree. And it's actually, John and I talked about this on the pod last night. Jeremy Grant rips your heart out a lot of times. But man, when he's going good, he's been really good. I mean, just the other day, he gives you 30 actual, and then the next day he comes back complete dud. And he plays, 22 minutes last night. So first off, I like that he only played 22 minutes, because, well-rested and traveling to Denver, not an easy place to travel. But he's used to playing in Denver, right? I'm sure the altitude's not going to impact him at all. Not that he played a whole bunch in Denver, but I'm just kidding. He was obviously a key member of that rotation. Right. They obviously didn't think he was going to be this good, but I do think Jeremy Grant warrants some love. And I hate, Fensty, that Isaiah Stewart is a power forward on FanDuel and a center on DraftKings.
I know.
Justin, what position did Isaiah Stewart start at last night?
He starts at center.
Then why are we getting Isaiah Stewart at power forward?
Well, I asked the same question about Bam for the last 2 years, okay?
Fair. Touche, Bam. Touche.
Right.
Touche. I got nothing for you there.
So we mentioned Isaiah Stewart in a good spot here. Again, we're waiting the news on Hamidou Diallo. News that just came across, James. We got to talk about Semi Ojeleye, active. Just want to put that out there for you. So big news right there.
Load up on Semi tonight.
No, don't load up.
Don't load up on Semi. No. Don't load up on Semi.
Bad, James.
Please.
Damn it, Fensty, I shouldn't have said anything. Let's move on to center here before I get myself in trouble. All right, we've got Joel Embiid. I mean, you mentioned to me all aboard him. No one's going to be able to stop him. I'm not worried about anything regarding his minutes or anything like that. Here's the deal, though. Jokic, who's also in a good spot, does that fall into our latest narrative of if they're going to be up 20, it's going to be because of him, and we don't go to him, or we still can go with him?
That it's tough, right? Because when we do with someone like Porzingis, he's 7.5 to 8K,
right?
And it's easier to pay off. And I'm not saying 40 points is easy to pay off, because it's not. But we need like 52 fantasy points over on DraftKings for him to hit 5x. It's tough. And I mentioned the scoring has definitely been down. I mean, the shot attempts have been down 12, 14, 16, 11. They haven't needed him to, they haven't lost any of those games, right? Not against the best competition. They did beat the Clippers. They beat Philly, but no Embiid. So, will they need that scoring tonight against Detroit? I'm not sure. Whereas Embiid has averaged 40 actual points in 2 meetings against the Celtics this year. So, and we expect that game to be more competitive, I think, at least initially. Again, NBA is crazy. This year, crazier things have happened than Denver or Detroit keeping it competitive. I just like what Embiid has been able to do against Boston. I like that there's nothing to do with Embiid's injury, completely off the injury report. And then Jokic, I don't love that everyone else is scoring. Everyone else is getting theirs. We mentioned Porter, we mentioned Gordon, Murray. But Jokic is, still this elite guy, but he's just I think he's just feeling it out more than anything, figuring out how much he can trust Aaron Gordon and how much all the rest of this unit's going to mesh. So I prefer Embiid. And then plus, there's a lot of – I think this is a really good position tonight, personally. I think – and Isaiah Stewart is a center on DraftKings at freaking $3,700. So
you know what? Look, we talk about Clint Capella a lot. He's priced up big time. He's almost $10K on FanDuel. I'm not going there with that. So
No.
instead, where else can I look? I can look right at that late night hammer, the Portland LA matchup, and look at both Enes Kanter with no Yusuf Nurkic. And you can look at Ivica Zubac as well, right?
Yeah, Zubac has been really consistent, and as you mentioned, I mean, we love using Cantor. We just always want minutes. Well, there's no Nurkic. We're gonna get the minutes. That shouldn't be the issue. So I'm completely with you. And you're not gonna get Cantor at 6K alone, right? We're gonna get Cantor in the future at 6K when Nurkic is active and when they're at full strength. So I think this is a great time to take advantage of Enes Kanter. Because again, we are not going to get this guy alone. Yeah, I do like Enes Kanter. I do like Zubac. I think Zubac has a pretty safe floor. I don't think this is
for Valanciunas tonight, even though he's been on a major double streak.
We can definitely go there. I mean, the Minnesota game, he got in foul trouble. They won. They were consistently ahead. They didn't need him to check back into the game. He still put up 35 fantasy points with 5 fouls. We can go to J-Val. But like you mentioned, I mean, we could just save 1,400 and go to Cantor. We can save.
You have to. To.
I mean, we could just save a bunch of money on a whole bunch of guys. And I know Mason Plumlee. I know we keep talking up Isaiah Stewart, and Plumlee isn't, I guess, technically listed on the injury report, but Stewart's playing his 25 to 30 minutes anyway.
Plumlee was resting yesterday.
Right.
They're staggering resting, which is what's scaring me about Detroit. And this is everybody has to pay attention here. And even those in season-long leagues, these teams that have 5-game weeks, and there are a few of them spread out over the remaining 5 weeks of the season or whatever it is, you're going to have to be weary that they're going to stagger likely resting players. So that's something you're going to have to think about if you're going to take a shot on a team that is likely in not only one, but potentially 2 back-to-backs in a 5-game week. You can follow James Grande on Twitter at _real_Grande. Follow me at Fantasy Sports. Get in the chat. Get those lineups set. 8 games on the slate to dominate because there isn't any other option. We just win.